Great.
All right. Well, good morning, good day, and good evening, wherever you are in the world. And welcome to the Social Media for Customer Service in the Hospitality Industry webinar. Many thanks to Travel Massive for co-hosting this event. We are Eric and Amber Hoffman of WIT Media, a social media consulting and training company. After this webinar, you'll feel more confident in your brand's social media, customer service. We know how confidently to respond to social media service issues and how to improve your brand and ultimately to increase revenue. You will also learn some best practices for responding to customer service issues through the different social media channels, focusing in on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
So that's us, since you don't get an actual video of us this morning. So just a little bit about who we are. We are Amber and Eric. I'll take top billing, as Christy said. And we're from the culinary and luxury travel blog With Husband in Tow. So together, through the blog, we basically traveled the world working to promote hotel properties, restaurants, and travel brands. Our real niche is food, wine, and luxury travel. And yes, there are days when I think that we've seen it all. We've stayed in everything from budget hostels to the Ritz-Carlton and everything in between. We've dined on street food and at some of the top restaurants in the world. We've logged so many nights in hotels that we've entirely lost track of how many we've stayed in. But while traveling, what we realized was that we became frustrated with how many of the brands we partnered with, both big and small, just failed to take advantage of the investment they made in working with us as influencers. And we quickly realized they needed help in realizing the enormous benefits of social media, not just from working with influencers, but even at a more basic level. So we created WIT Media to provide actionable steps to help travel brands increase bookings and revenue through their social media channels. So as we mentioned, we're social media consultants and trainers, and we specialize in helping hospitality brands transform their social channels to drive an increase in bookings and sales. And over the last 2 years, we've worked with hotel managers and staff to help improve their social channels and to reach their marketing goals. We've done consulting contracts and in-person social media training for management teams. We also have an online social media training course that's dedicated to the hotel industry. So, because our specialty is helping hotel brands, much of the advice and the examples in this webinar might seem maybe a little bit too tailored to hotels, but I think the tips and the best practices can be applied to all hospitality brands, including restaurants and tour operators. Really, the tips apply to any brands that have customers who rely on customer service to distinguish themselves from other brands. And just a note on why we do what we do. We've seen many hotel and travel brands struggle with communicating their brand on social media. And it's frustrating sometimes to us to see the lack of understanding of basic social media applications. We've seen many hotels that, sometimes leave their social media in the hands of a young person, because if they're young, they must know social media. But particularly when it comes to social customer service, that's not really enough. In fact, just recently, so we live in Girona, Spain, about an hour or so north of Barcelona. And just recently, we contacted a local hotel because they had just opened a rooftop bar. And I couldn't find any information on their website or Facebook page about the hours of the rooftop bar. And I wanted to take Eric there. This was for his birthday a couple months ago. And so I sent them a Facebook message in the morning to find out their hours. Now, granted, it was a Saturday morning, but hotels and travel brands, for the most part, they're 24/7 businesses. So not only did I not hear back that day, but we actually walked to the hotel to ask our question at the front desk.
Very old school.
Very old school, because I still don't trust my Spanish skills over the phone, which is a big issue for lots of travelers, I'm sure. So I was sort of annoyed, and like we didn't actually go to the rooftop bar that day for a birthday cocktail for Eric, but I finally received a response from the hotel the following Friday, 6 days after sending that Facebook message. And I haven't been back to check out the bar since that time. They've essentially lost revenue. We went to a bar down the road. And this is why we do what we do. We don't want you or other travel brands to make the same mistakes. Instead, we want to help you understand how to promote your offerings and how to provide great service on social media to capture those dollars, not to send them to a competitor. If we can ask others to put the call on mute for right now until we open it up to Q&A later, that would be great. Thanks.
Okay, so let's first start with how to define social media service, social customer service. How much money do travel brands invest each year in developing talent and training them on customer service? I would gather a lot.
A lot.
You know, you're hiring somebody and you want them to perform well. It can make or break a brand. What we found interesting is how many hospitality brands don't invest the same amount in developing online customer service as they do with their in-person customer service. So let's talk about what is customer service, and then let's talk about why customer service is so important, especially with social media.
So in the past, customers generally interacted with your brand in more traditional ways. If you're a hotel, they would visit the front desk, or a travel brand, they would visit your storefront. They would maybe call on the telephone or even use a travel agent to handle their booking. Then guests started to send emails or otherwise contact you through your website, through a contact form, for example. Now, guests have so many more tools at their fingertips, which might make you feel like you're like a circus clown juggling about a million balls. But this is the trend, and we all need to learn to adapt, because increasingly, customers are turning to social media to interact with brands to resolve problems.
Yeah, I think we've all been there. We've all been stuck in an airport and sent out a tweet in anger because your bag isn't there, or your room is not ready at check-in. So increasingly, social media and customer service are what guests are turning to.
So there are a few different reasons why a guest or a potential guest will try to reach out to you through social media. Many brands tend to focus on the negative, and they're afraid to really grow their online presence in case a guest posts a negative review or comment online. That's going to happen. It's unavoidable. But what is important is how you respond to it. But there's another reason why a guest might reach out to you on social. They just might want to interact. They might want to share a moment that they've experienced with your brand. And there's another, just as important reason why a guest might reach out to you on social, for a request or to resolve an issue before they even arrive or before they even book your service. These are almost the sort of hidden interactions, the ones that might not be given as much time or attention as they should. But at its core, social customer service is nothing more than answering the phone. So I want to take you into the world of being a hotel GM. And imagine that you're that GM. And think about traditional ways that guests communicated with your brand. They might call the hotel before they arrived, or even more frequent, they call from their room to the front desk. Now, put yourself in the shoes of that hotel GM and walk up to your front desk. You have 3 front of house team members standing at the front desk when the phone rings. The phone continues to ring over and over, and no one answers the phone. I imagine you, as the GM, would be, well, a little upset, and that potentially those 3 team members might be looking for a new job. You would never stand behind a front desk and ignore a ringing phone. So why should it be any different on social, on Facebook, Twitter, and even Instagram? Those channels are just like your front desk or front office telephone, and guests are using these channels to get help, and you need to answer. So we're going to talk today a little bit more about how important social customer service is, but mostly about how you can make it easier for guests to resolve issues on social and how you can answer the phone to help them.
And I would say this is the root of why we created WIT Media, is that many times we did make the phone ring and just never heard from the hotel or the tour company or the restaurant that we were trying to communicate with. And it was very frustrating.
Even this week, this is outside of the hospitality industry, but I've been in an online discussion with the clothing store H&M because their computer system wasn't accepting my credit card, and it's been 12 days since I initially contacted them, and it's been a botched customer service issue since then. So we all know that this is what happens.
If social customer service involves guests or potential guests interacting with your brand through Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, which on the face seems pretty simple, why is social customer service so important?
In today's travel industry, customer service is how you set yourself apart from your competitors. For example, every hotel can offer white sheets and fluffy duvets and down pillows. Everyone can offer a welcome drink on arrival and fresh flowers in the guest room. Every food tour can offer food and drink. But what sets one brand apart from a competitor are the experiences that people have, the memories they create, and a large part of this experience is the guest service that is provided by the brand, from the booking process down to the checkout process, and even their experiences before and after that. And a large part of this experience comes from how a hotel interacts with its guests on social media. So to be at the competitive edge, hotels and travel brands as well need to be involved and engaged with their audience by taking part in online discussions, by building and increasing awareness around its brand, as well as forging existing relationships with loyal and potential customers.
So we all love stats, right?
It's all about the numbers.
Glad I wasn't a math major. So let's talk a little bit more about stats. This is from the Huffington Post, that 55% of customer service requests are not answered. I want to let that sink in for a second, that they're not answered. It's an astonishing fact and stat. And, until we, saw this, we assumed that everything was just taken care of with no problem.
Yeah, but then you start thinking back to your own customer service experiences and you start to realize, how often am I ignored by brands?
Yeah.
I mean, it might not be 55% of the time, but sometimes it feels like it's about that that much.
Does. Especially when you're upset that, your bags have been lost or whatever. Okay, here's another one. 43% of customers expect customer service via social media to be integrated by companies. This means that customers expect that brand will be ready to answer the phone on social media. Now, granted, this stat is from 2016, and we're pretty certain that number has increased since then. There's plenty of stats out there, and we can certainly share a ton more, but let's finish with our numbers game by saying that strong customer service on social media can increase customer satisfaction by 20%. We'll see what that means in a minute, but think about that. Increasing by 20%. That's not a small number. But that's what we're going to do in terms of stats. If you take your social customer service seriously, and you take the time to improve customer service, you can set yourself apart from your competitors. Aim to be in that 45% that do respond to customer service on social media.
Okay, so I want to share what we like to call a true confession or a true story of social customer service. So our first true confession comes from last year when we were in Toulouse, France. We don't speak French, and we would not have a French SIM card on arrival at the airport. And also, the airport is a small one and doesn't have the same kind of resources as like a Heathrow or Charles de Gaulle in Paris. So when on the hotel website a week before arrival, Eric was researching how to get to the hotel from the airport. And the website said, hotel shuttle available on request, but had no information on how to request the shuttle. Did I need to arrange it ahead of time? Was there a shuttle stop at the airport? Was there a courtesy phone? These are all really typical questions from travelers. So a week before arrival, I sent an email to the hotel, and I sent a Facebook message, and I sent them a tweet. Within those 7 days leading up to my arrival, I never heard anything, not a peep from the hotel. It was crickets. Now, like many other travelers, I didn't want to call the hotel. I was not in France and would need to pay for an international call. I'd have to figure out the country code for France and then go through the stress from my lack of French skills. So when we arrived at the airport, we sort of wandered around looking for information, thinking if we couldn't find info on the shuttle, we would just take a taxi, which would have been an extra unnecessary expense. We found the information desk at the airport and actually called the hotel for us. The information desk made the call, and the shuttle arrived about 10 minutes later. Now, in the end, it wasn't too much of a hassle, but it was more hassle and stress than what I actually wanted when I was arriving in France. And when I showed up at the hotel, I was annoyed. I was on edge, and I felt like I had been ignored. I was wondering if I should have stayed at another hotel instead, and that's not how you want your guests to show up. The hotel did, finally, respond to my Facebook message. Exactly 1 week after we checked out, a full 2 weeks after we started to first contact them. And well after they could have done anything. And they knew they blew it too, because their response was, next time you stay with us, just know you can ask at the airport information desk. I don't think I'll be returning to the hotel. I mean, this was an epic social customer service fail in my mind. And I don't think the hotel realized just how much they messed up.
And it's not that difficult. I mean, 3 different ways to attempt to reach somebody, and strike 1, strike 2, and strike 3.
Yeah, exactly. So what happens when your guests or customers arrive angry? Now, what does this true confession mean? What was the effect to this particular hotel? Now, as it is, many guests arrive at a hotel after a long journey. They're tired, perhaps jet lagged. If they're business travelers, maybe they don't even want to be there in the first place. Maybe they're hungry and just in need of a shower. Or they're spending their hard-earned vacation days with your brand, and they just want to make the most of their holiday. So why add anger or annoyance to that mix? No one wants a guest to arrive angry or to be thinking that the brand doesn't value them as a customer. And this is just how we felt when we arrived in Toulouse. I was so annoyed that I refused to spend any more money with the hotel. We only stayed 2 nights, but we ate all of our meals outside of the hotel. Now, sure, I would have preferred maybe to grab a glass of wine in the lovely lobby bar at the end of the day, or maybe just eat at the hotel restaurant, but instead we walked almost a mile to find other food options. Both nights we were there, and that's revenue that the hotel could have had, but didn't. So not only did the hotel lose on the customer satisfaction, but they lost on the revenue too. And this is the opposite of what Eric just said, that strong customer service on social media can increase customer satisfaction by 20%. Instead, that revenue was sent down the street. So this true confession is the perfect example of a brand that did not answer the phone, even though we contacted them 3 different ways. And certainly there are customer service stories a lot worse than this one out there. But we also want to take a moment and say, don't make customer service horror stories on social media make you run for the hills. I mean, that would be like saying, I'm not going to open a hotel in case someone complains. It's just counterproductive. You have to be on social. So run into the wave. Don't avoid it. Learn the do's and don'ts and the best practices of social customer service so you can provide excellent service online. And this all starts with how to answer the phone.
Okay, so are you stressed out?
Have we stressed you out enough that you want to slowly disconnect from the webinar, close your laptop, and never return to this topic again?
Yes. How many folks are calling down to the front desk?
I mean, our participants' numbers have not decreased since we started this, so that's at least a good sign.
But don't worry, we've got some tips coming up that will certainly alleviate these
stressful
moments.
So customer service is evolving to match the rapid growth and development of new communication methods or new communication media. And today's most popular social media platforms are the perfect opportunity to capitalize on that trend. So yes, this quote is from 2014, but it is just as relevant today. So social media is constantly changing and evolving. New channels and new features within each channel. I mean, what was once just Facebook is then Facebook pages and then advertising and now messaging, reviews, Facebook Live, Facebook stories. I mean, how can we even keep up with it all? I mean, even as influencers, I'm like, how do we keep up with it? And customer service is evolving along with all of these changes. So it's true that several years ago, you only needed to worry about answering the phone, or maybe worry about TripAdvisor reviews, maybe a few booking sites that had review portals. But now this is extended beyond those sites to multiple channels. So the question becomes, why do you need to step up your game on social customer service?
Well, there's several reasons why you need to step up your game on social media. Communication is immediate. I mean, think about how quickly a tweet can be sent out. And certainly upset customers want immediate service. Social media is immediate, they want immediate service. It's important to have your plan in place in order to respond quickly. You give people a more personal brand experience. People tend to favor dealing with other people rather than corporations. Think about that for a second. They want to know the person behind the brand. Manage your customer service through social media will give you the best of both worlds. It's important to make your guests realize that there is a human at the other end.
Yeah, I'd actually be curious. We're seeing a lot more of the social media chatbots, like Christy had mentioned at the start. And I think they can be a great way to be more efficient with customer service, but you have to make sure that the person feels like they're being heard, and that when need be, you do end up with a human being resolving your issue if need be.
Very true. The conversation is transparent. Customers want to be heard, and social media allows for this to happen. Social media allows companies to respond immediately, making the customer feel valued. There's a lot of choices out there for customers, and they want to feel that love. Your followers see that interactions making them feel more confident in your customer service abilities.
And that's really big, particularly on Twitter, but even on Facebook as well, that when your guests or customers reach out to you on Facebook, that's not just a Facebook message that's private. It is public, and other people can see your responses. And so it is important to make sure that you're responding to people effectively, because other people can tell whether or not you're listening.
Yeah. This is one of my favorites, being a former ad guy. You're mentioning, if you're being mentioned more on social media, it's more opportunities to point back to your brand. You'll get brand visibility and opportunities to show your ability to quickly and effectively correct the problem, and that's invaluable. If you solve somebody's problem publicly on a tweet or in Facebook, and people can see that that's the type of service you provide, you're going to drive customers to you. Follow-up is easy. If you manage to resolve a problem with a quick answer, you can immediately ask whether or not the interaction was helpful. You can't necessarily do that with an email or
even a phone call.
This is an opportunity to take further action if the problem hasn't been resolved. So, the speed in which things can be done on social media it's eye-opening.
Yeah. Okay. So we've talked about how to define social customer service and talked extensively about why it is so important. But now we're going to start turning to some of the best practices for social customer service. So here the focus is on how you can answer the phone effectively and how you can make it easier for your customers to resolve issues through social media. There are multiple ways that guests can reach out to you in order to resolve their issues, but particularly for brands that operate in an international marketplace, there are some barriers to some of these more traditional methods. First, it's always possible to Google the brand's website and find a phone number, or find the phone number on a booking confirmation. But how easy is it to call the number? I mean, remember our hotel issue in France. I mean, think about someone in another country trying to figure out if they have international calls in their calling plan. They're trying to look up a country code. They're wondering what time it is in the local time zone of the hotel. Then they're wondering how well the person on the other line will speak their language. What if the person calling is Spanish and they're calling a Thai hotel? I mean, that's not easy. It can be intimidating. Even if they're able to make the call, no one wants to worry about, wait times, lengthy, unproductive conversations, being transferred to different departments. I mean, this whole experience can leave a real sour taste in your guest's mouth.
Well, and as Americans, we don't know how to dial international.
Yeah, or speak foreign languages. There are some stereotypes there. Second, what about submitting a contact form on your website? Even if it's easy to find the contact form, it's incredibly impersonal. Guests never know where the contact form is going, when it will be replied to, or by whom. And there's a similar situation with an email. Although it's often preferable to a contact form, not only can a lot of the communication get lost in the process, but it can also take days to respond. People don't respond to emails as quickly as they do other forms of communication. So why do guests reach out on social media channels? Most of the time, it's because other channels have failed. In fact, 71% of consumers complain online because traditional channels failed. And this can be particularly true in the hospitality industry. But even think about the airline industry for a moment. I mean, Eric's mentioned some airline examples. Sure, you would rather have the gate agent or the cabin crew resolve an issue that you might have. Sure, you'd rather they just find your lost luggage. But when you've exhausted your options, and most likely your patience,
very true,
are you more inclined to figure out another option to reach resolution? Do you start to become so annoyed that you want to vent that frustration in public?
So, how can guests reach out to you now? They can send a tweet. Direct message is available also on Twitter. They can post on your Facebook page. They can also send you a message with Facebook Messenger. It's more likely that they would send this Facebook message
then post to the Facebook page.
Post to the Facebook page, yeah. And increasingly, guests are reaching out through direct message on Instagram, which is essentially, Facebook Lite.
Yeah.
And, that's important to keep in mind, to monitor each of these channels, to know how people reach out to you and how you can respond.
So we now live in a world where a guest can call you, email you, fill out a contact form, stop by your front desk, tweet you, direct message you on Twitter, and send a Facebook message, or even DM you on Instagram.
That sounds like a lot of fun. And I'm sure there's people who've done them all.
Yeah. How many of us want to switch industries right now?
Yeah, exactly.
The important thing is not to feel overwhelmed by the options. In fact, you want to make it easier for the guest to reach out to you, not make it more difficult. Don't shut off your Facebook message function or ignore your direct messages, making a guest try to contact you in multiple ways. You want your guests to feel confident that then when they reach out to you in any channel or format, that you will be there to respond and help them resolve their issue.
Yeah, and just a sort of a quick little side note, we had a call earlier this week with a hotel who has essentially given up on Twitter. And I love Twitter. I think it's a great channel, but they've sort of given up on it. But guess what? Guests haven't. A lot of people use Twitter to complain, and that's mentioning your brand in many cases not in a positive light. So you do need to monitor all these different channels,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
exactly.
Okay, so how can we resolve some of these issues? Let's get into a little bit of specifics. We've sort of told enough tales. First, channel matters. Speed matters, as we've seen. And certainly the tone of voice also matters. Lastly, take things offline when needed. As much as we said it's great to resolve things out in public, there are times, especially on Twitter, when you're limited, that you need to take things offline. So let's walk through some of these. First and foremost, respond to the channel guests used to contact you. Nothing is more frustrating than when you send a tweet or a Facebook message and you get a response back. Call our 800 number to resolve this issue. Amber knows that personally this week.
Yes, that's exactly what's been going on with my customer service dispute with H&M. Guests don't want to reach out via a platform only to be told to call a toll-free number. And this is from Dan Moriarty, Director of Social Strategy for Hyatt. He says they want to have the conversation in the channel in which they are most comfortable with, not the channel that you are most comfortable with.
Okay.
Oh yeah, yeah. So I can tell you from my very personal experience, joking about H&M and everything else, that channel matters is very important. I admit I hate telephone calls. Maybe it's from spending years as a tax attorney and I spent more than was necessary or healthy on conference calls each day. Many of you probably feel the exact same. I kind of feel like I'm allergic to the telephone. This is particularly true when I don't feel comfortable with the local language. So nothing annoys me more than contacting a property through Facebook message and then being asked to call an 800 number to resolve my issues. In fact, it often makes me feel like they are making it more difficult to resolve the issue in hopes that I will just give up. And this is not how you want your guests to feel. And with H&M, I have given up. By respecting the channel that they chose, you are respecting their decision and focusing then on how to resolve their issue, not to sort of push them into another channel. So this is extremely important and one of, I think, my favorite best practices, because I think a lot of the brands out there don't necessarily think of things this way.
Yeah, I agree 100% on that. And, you know, I think brands are starting to recognize that a little bit more and more. Speed. I'm afraid the next couple of slides may get people to start dropping off the call because speed matters. We live in a world now where everything has to be done, as they say, yesterday. And customer service on social media is certainly the same.
Yeah, I mean, this seems like something that doesn't need to be said because of course you want to resolve issues as quickly as possible, but you'd be surprised. I mean, when it comes to social customer service, speed really matters. So let's see, how much does speed matter? 32% of users expect a response within 30 minutes. 42% expect a response within 60 minutes. But 24 hours is still acceptable. Yes, that is the standard. Life moves pretty fast. Now, you have to remember hospitality brands, and particularly hotels, are a 24/7 business. Even if your marketing office is only open 9 to 5, guests expect you to be a 24-hour business. And so it's important to put together a team to manage customer service issues on social when the main person responsible for your social media marketing, isn't around. Yeah. That means nights, weekends, when that person is on vacation.
Holiday, yeah. Okay, the tone of voice also matters. And in some respects, this is customer service 101. I'm sure we're preaching to the choir. But resolving issues over social media, it becomes important. And in fact, the tone of voice is massively important in customer service. There are a few easy clues that you can practice spotting in any social media message.
So does the customer use emoticons or exclamation points and slang? I mean, this is often a green light for you to reciprocate, to be a little bit more casual than a formal business-like voice. Does the customer sound like they might not be totally fluent in your language? In this case, you need to be much more careful with nuances like slang. It's more important to use very simple words. Or does the customer sound frustrated? This is when it's time to turn up the empathy and to use a tone that's more understanding, apologetic, and reassuring. And then try not to escalate their frustration, but instead try to diffuse it. Now, this is easier said than done. This is a form of art and takes so much practice, but it's important to take the time to practice that, particularly when it comes to tone of voice online.
And again, I think many in the hospitality world are trained on this, and it's just a matter of taking that in-person training and applying it to typed out messages. Okay, take things offline.
When necessary.
When necessary and the right way. As it is important to listen and respond to your customers on social media, not every issue can be resolved via social media. Sometimes a channel does not allow you to write a long message, i.e. Twitter. Sometimes, sensitive customer information needs to be shared, and you do not want that out in the public space. So take things offline. Both Facebook and Twitter and Instagram allow messaging options.
Yeah. So the thing here is to know when to take it offline, and then the key is only when needed and to do it the right way. So when should you take things offline? First, when the guest tone is too elevated. And again, that's sort of a sniff test. You know it when you see it. Second, when private information needs to be shared. And third, and obviously this is a reference to Twitter, when 140 characters is just not enough. It's important to note a few things here. Social media crisis management isn't about winning. It's about damage control. Some people will be angry enough that you're not going to convince them of anything. Do not get in an online tit for tat ever, and certainly not in a crisis scenario. Keyboards make us all say things that you later regret. And sometimes, I always say, the best course of action is to offer your phone number or email address and encourage the guest to contact you that way. Is this the ideal situation? No. We want to resolve everything we can in the channel they chose. But when the person's tone is so elevated, or perhaps they're a little trolly, it's okay to take the conversation off of a public channel. Will doing this take that kettle off boil? Will it take it down to a simmer? Sometimes. But even if it doesn't, the rest of the community sees that you went the extra mile and provided an olive branch. And that matters because crisis management is a spectator sport.
Yeah, too many people are watching these sorts of things.
Yeah. Especially, with things moving so quickly on Facebook. And most important, when you do take things offline, it's important to respond publicly first. This way, your other fans and followers know that you are listening. And that is extremely important, particularly on Twitter and particularly on Facebook. You always want to respond publicly first and then take it offline. You don't want your guests to just assume that you've handled the issue. You want them to know that you've handled the issue.
And I have to give a little plug to my favorite airline. Cathay Pacific Airways does one of the best jobs on social media with what Amber just talked about. Somebody presenting an issue, them taking it offline, and then resolving it and letting people know that they resolved it publicly. They're fantastic. Absolutely one of the best.
Yeah, and it's actually to pay attention to Cathay Pacific, KLM, and JetBlue.
Yeah.
They're some of the folks that are, I know they're airlines and they're not hotels. They obviously have a lot more resources, but they're great brands to follow for how to manage social customer service issues because they do it really, really well. And so particularly on Twitter, I would actually recommend checking in with them on a regular basis just to sort of learn by example.
Yeah, and I think we can say that the airline industry is probably the most complained about in
Easily.
the world. Yeah.
Okay. So once again, because this really are the sort of the best practices of how you can make it easier for guests to resolve issues. First, channel matters. Stay on the channel they chose whenever possible. Second, speed matters. 30 minutes, 60 minutes.
24 hours is still okay.
Definitely not more than 24 hours, and certainly not a week after the guest has checked out. Third, tone of voice matters, and it's okay to match the guest's tone of voice. And last, take things offline only when needed and always respond publicly first.
All right. Well, that's all the time we have today. I hope we're making you think a little bit more about your brand's social customer service. This has definitely been a pleasure for Amber and I to talk about this. You know, at the end of the day, it's important to answer the phone. It's a very simple concept, but so important. And to use these 4 best practices to help ensure your guests' issues on social are resolved. You know, granted, we've only been talking for 41 minutes, and this only scratches the surface, but you know, these 4 steps will certainly, you know, help elevate your customer service, continue to keep people loyal to your brand, and most importantly, you know, solve those easy problems that are presented probably on a daily basis.
Yeah, that is true. So thank you for listening to us talk on about a topic that is so important. We always say social customer service might not be the sexiest topic for a webinar, but it's a topic that we are passionate about. And so in a moment, we'll open it up and people can ask any questions that they might have. You can always reach out to us at WIT Media for any further questions. And we will do one little plug. We actually do have online courses. We have an online course that's specifically dedicated to social media customer service and how to handle a crisis, which is happening a lot more frequently in the world, unfortunately, as well as some other courses. So if any of you guys are interested, feel free to email us and we can provide you any information. Also, for anyone who joined and stayed on the webinar or listens to the replay, we are offering a special 30% off any courses. So that's our one little sales plug. Christy, sorry. We have to do at least a little bit. But we will open it up to any questions that people might have about anything that we discussed today, as well as any other customer service or crisis issues that you guys might be facing with your brand.
Okay, great. Thanks, guys, so much. I have to say I'm really happy not to be in the customer service game after listening to that. So we are going to open it up for questions now. So for those of you that haven't, don't regularly come along to these webinars, to ask a question, you just need to raise your hand. So to do that, you simply need to click on the participants button at the bottom of your screen, and from there you should be able to raise your hand. Okay, so as you guys are finding that button, I'm actually going to ask a question.
Sure.
So I absolutely loved your analogy about answering the phone and how that was, no different than answering social media. I think you convinced each one of us here about that, but I'm wondering, what's your take on, say, if you are that GM, then how should you go about convincing those in your customer service team to respect social media messages as much as a phone call? I mean, obviously, besides making them watch this webinar.
That's a good one, because I think general managers admittedly will say they don't know anything about social media.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it's a topic that I think we're going to start delving into a little bit more. We're actually thinking about doing a course on helping GMs understand social media, not only to build their own brand, but to understand what their team is doing. Because I think that it's hard, and I think the biggest thing is you have to have a GM that sort of gets it and that can sit down with the marketing folks who are the people who are generally, the direct line for those customer service requests, and talk with them about the plan and what's their plan of action, whether it's just for regular customer service or a crisis, you have to have a plan in place, and it has to be more than 9 to 5.
Yeah.
And I think it is, they can steal our answer the phone metaphor. We actually got it from someone else and have developed it over time. We were told it's actually Mr. Scott Eddy, for those of you who follow him, who said that Twitter is basically like a phone. It's a conversation. And he sort of taught us that, and we sort of developed it into this metaphor of using it for social customer service. But I think it's really just empowering them to feel confident in not just responding, but resolving issues in a timely and effective manner, and focusing on it after hours and on the weekend.
Yeah, and I even think, again, it's answer the phone. It's acknowledge the noise that your guest has put out there. And I don't mean noise in the negative sense. You may not have the answer right away. You may be the midnight to 8 a.m. person, but if at least you answer the phone and acknowledge the guest's issue, you can say, listen, we'll get you an answer. Just hang in there with us, but we've recognized that you have an issue. So I think that's the biggest point, is just acknowledging to the guests their message.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I love that that Twitter line that you said. I am such a fan of Twitter. I know everybody's kind of hating on Twitter at the moment. Poor Twitter. But I love it. I can't get enough of Twitter.
I agree.
It's the best. But it looks like we don't have any questions. I'm going to assume that it's a little bit too early and a little bit too late for the people that are on this webinar today. We don't usually have it at this time.
Sure.
Yeah. So, Christy, I do want to kind of follow up with something that you had mentioned earlier, and to kind of further what Eric just said, because I think it's important. We're talking about how important it is to very quickly respond to social customer service issues. And you mentioned about the chat bots for customer service, which again are becoming very, very popular. Even Facebook messages allow you to put in an autoresponder, which I have some mixed feelings about. I think that can be helpful if done in the right way. But I also think that particularly for hospitality brands, you have to make sure that you're not just responding quickly on Facebook message, but that you're actually resolving the issue. And so it's almost an art form to figure out how to best word those bots, or how best to word the Facebook message autoresponder to make it clear that, yes, it's very obvious. We all know, we've all sent Facebook messages to brands and had that autoresponder come back. And that it's not a real person on the other end, but you also have to manage expectations and make sure that those people know, yes, you're responding immediately, but you're not resolving. And that's a different thing. And to have those plans in place of what can the marketing person who's responding to the Facebook message, what are they empowered to do? Like, where do they get their most, what are the most typical questions they get? How can they have those answers at their fingertips? How can they contact the right people on the property to resolve things that are a little bit more complicated? And putting all of those sort of plans in place makes it a lot more efficient, not just to respond, but to resolve the issue.
Yeah, absolutely. The chatbot that we recently made for Club Med, it actually has something in place where it automatically gets escalated to the human customer service team if the chatbot cannot just resolve the issue immediately. So,
Sure.
Without that kind of escalation, I think a chatbot's not probably the best idea unless you have that escalation in place.
It's also one of the things we get a little frustrated about the hospitality industry is everyone is quick to start running when they need to learn how to walk first.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
things like
absolutely.
everyone hears about chatbots and artificial intelligence and all those sorts of things. But sadly, there are a lot of brands out there that don't know how to send a tweet.
Or are not taking advantage of Facebook in the way that they should, and are making very clear mistakes on Facebook. That we actually, there's a property that we worked with. It's not a hotel, but it's a villa apartment rental property that just in the last week or so, I guess, suddenly decided that they needed to be on Facebook more. and they shared basically everything that's been written about them by any blogger, influencer, writer, article, by copying the link to the article, letting it auto-populate, leaving the link in there, not saying anything about the article. And they did it 25 times in one day. And I just was like scratching my head.
That is
my
dreadful.
whole feed was filled with their links. And so, Eric's right. And this is a luxury brand. It's small, but it's still a luxury brand. There are so many situations where people are starting to think about artificial intelligence and virtual reality and chatbots, but they don't necessarily have the basics figured out yet. And so, we're firm believers. We keep saying this over and over again. You have to walk before you can run sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. Like even putting aside chatbots and artificial intelligence and all of that, even just, having customer service on social media, you really need to, up your social media game first. Otherwise, it's not going to work.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Exactly. Anyone out there who wants to raise their hand? We still have some participants out there, so obviously what we're saying is still interesting. We're still entertaining.
Or somebody's out there.
I know sometimes it's hard, particularly when you're in the hotel industry, to kind of air these types of questions in public because you're always concerned about your competitor down the road or on the other side of the street, knowing what your issues are. So I will say that if you guys do have any questions whatsoever, feel free to reach out to us. We have our email addresses there. We're also on Facebook at WIT Media, so you can send us a Facebook message. There is not an autoresponder, and we will reply in less than 24 hours. We promise.
Yeah, I'm sure you guys will be really quick at it.
You have to practice what we preach.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so I guess it's time to end the webinar here. So thanks so much for joining, everyone, and I'll see you at the next one.
Thanks
guys
so much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Appreciate your time.
Stay social.
Yep. Answer the phone.